A mother knows the sound of her baby breathing, but she remembers the silence forever. At 12:07 a.m., Claire Bennett woke up in her small apartment on the south edge of Chicago because the room had become too quiet. Not peaceful. Not still in the way exhausted mothers prayed for after long nights of rocking and whispering and walking circles across worn carpet. This was the kind of quiet that made every nerve in her body sit up before she did. For one frozen second, Claire lay beneath the thin quilt, eyes open in the dark, listening for the tiny rasp that usually came from the crib beside her bed. Lily always made some sound. A sigh, a soft cough, a breath catching in her chest before easing out again. But now there was nothing except the low hum of the old refrigerator in the kitchen and a car passing somewhere far below on the wet street. Claire turned her head slowly toward the crib, her heart already beginning to pound. "Lily," she whispered, pushing herself up on one elbow. The baby monitor on the crate beside her bed glowed green, but no sound came through it. Claire reached over and touched the little nightlight shaped like a moon, flooding the corner of the room with a pale yellow glow. Lily was lying on her back beneath a faded pink blanket, one tiny fist curled near her cheek, her eyes half open in a way Claire had never seen before. Her chest moved, but barely, each breath shallow and strained, as if the air had become too heavy for her 8-month-old body to pull in. Claire was out of bed before she knew she had moved. "No, no, no, sweetheart, Mommy's here," she said, lifting Lily into her arms. The baby's body felt warm, too warm, but her little fingers were cool against Claire's wrist. Claire pressed 2 trembling fingers beneath Lily's nose and felt the faintest whisper of air. Then Lily's mouth opened, searching, gasping, but the sound that came out was so thin it barely seemed human. Claire's knees weakened. The pediatrician had warned her that Lily's breathing could get worse during cold weather, that she should watch for wheezing, blue lips, long pauses, any sign that the medicine was not enough. Claire had watched. She had watched every night until her eyes burned. She had worked double shifts at the laundromat, come home smelling like detergent and coins, fed Lily, counted drops of medicine, and slept with one hand stretched toward the crib as if love alone could keep her child alive. But tonight, love was not enough. Lily's lips had a bluish tint under the night light. Claire grabbed her phone with one hand while cradling Lily against her chest with the other. Her fingers slipped twice before she managed to dial 911. The screen flashed red, 3% battery. "Please, please," Claire breathed, pacing the room barefoot. The line rang once, twice. 911, "What's your emergency?" a calm woman's voice answered. Claire opened her mouth, but terror jammed the words in her throat. "My baby," she finally choked out. "My baby can't breathe. She's 8 months old. Her name is Lily. Please, I need help. Ma'am, I need your address." Claire gave it too quickly, then repeated it when the dispatcher asked her to slow down. Lily's little chest jerked against her, a tiny, desperate movement that made Claire's vision blur. "Is she conscious?" the dispatcher asked. Claire looked down. Lily's eyes fluttered, unfocused. "I don't know. She's looking at me, but she's not really looking at me. Her lips are turning blue. Oh God, please hurry. Help is on the way. I'm going to stay with you." Lay her on a firm surface and keep her airway open. Claire cleared the kitchen table with one sweep of her arm, sending a stack of late notices, a plastic bottle, and a chipped mug clattering to the floor. She laid Lily on a folded towel, one hand shaking as she tilted the baby's head the way the dispatcher instructed. "You're doing good, Claire," the woman said, though Claire did not remember giving her name. Maybe she had. Maybe she had said everything. Maybe she had said nothing at all. The apartment seemed to shrink around her. The peeling paint near the window, the laundry basket full of uniforms, the envelope from Mercy Children's Hospital she had not opened because she already knew she could not pay it. None of it mattered. Not the rent due Friday. Not the $11 in her wallet. Not the manager who had warned her that one more missed shift would cost her the job. Only Lily mattered. Only the soft, broken breaths mattered. Then Lily's chest stopped moving. For one impossible second, Claire stared, waiting for the next breath to come. It did not. She stopped, Claire whispered. The dispatcher's voice sharpened, still controlled, but urgent. "Claire, listen to me carefully." Sirens began to cry in the distance, faint at first, then growing louder through the cold midnight rain. Claire bent over her daughter with tears falling onto the towel, following every instruction, begging between breaths. "Stay with me, Lily. Please stay with Mommy." And just before the pounding came at the apartment door, just before strangers in navy uniforms rushed into her life, Claire looked down and saw Lily's tiny hand twitch once, as if reaching for someone who had not arrived yet. The paramedics reached Lily before Claire could even understand that the door was open. One of them, a broad-shouldered man with rain dripping from his jacket, spoke to her in a steady voice while another knelt beside the kitchen table and placed a small oxygen mask over Lily's face. Claire stood frozen with her hands pressed to her mouth, still barefoot, still in the faded sweatshirt she had worn to bed, watching strangers do for her baby what she could not. "Ma'am, what is her name?" the first paramedic asked. "Lily," Claire said, her voice breaking. "Lily Bennett. She is 8 months old. She has had breathing problems before, but never like this. Never like this." He nodded and asked about medicine, allergies, fever, insurance, emergency contacts, questions that came too fast and landed too hard. Claire tried to answer while pulling Lily's diaper bag from beside the crib. She shoved in the inhaler, the half-empty bottle of infant fever reducer, 2 diapers, a thin blanket, and the little stuffed rabbit Lily only slept with when she was sick. Her phone screen went black in her hand before she could call anyone, not that there was anyone who would come. The paramedics lifted Lily onto a small stretcher, and Claire followed them down 3 flights of stairs into the cold midnight rain. The ambulance lights painted the brick apartment building red and white, like a warning the whole world could see. Mrs. Alvarez from apartment 2B cracked her door open, her gray hair pinned under a scarf. "Claire, honey, what happened?" She could not breathe, Claire said, but the words came out too small, swallowed by the siren as the ambulance doors opened. Inside, the air smelled like plastic, antiseptic, and wet pavement. Claire sat on the narrow bench, buckled in beside Lily, one hand curled around her daughter's ankle, because it was the only place the paramedic told her she could touch. Lily looked impossibly small beneath the straps and tubes, her lashes damp, her tiny chest rising with the help of oxygen. Claire stared at that rise and fall, as if watching a candle flame in a storm. "Is she going to be okay?" she asked. The younger paramedic glanced at the monitor, then at Claire. "We are doing everything she needs right now. Mercy Children's is 7 minutes out." 7 minutes. Claire had lived entire years that felt shorter. Her mind jumped to things that should not have mattered but did. The rent envelope on the counter. The laundromat schedule taped to the refrigerator. The hospital bill from 2 months ago, $3,842.16, folded under a magnet because hiding it in a drawer made her feel like a coward. Her wallet was still in the front pocket of the diaper bag. She pulled it out with numb fingers and opened it. $11. 15, 6 ones, and a grocery store receipt with a coupon she had planned to use for baby cereal. Behind the cash was her insurance card, the one that had been declined after her hours were cut and the premium bounced. She held it like it might become useful if she prayed hard enough. "Do you have insurance, ma'am?" the paramedic asked gently, as if he already knew the answer would hurt. Claire looked from the card to Lily. "I had it," she whispered. "I'm trying to fix it. My manager said if I can pick up 2 more shifts, maybe I can catch up." The words sounded ridiculous inside an ambulance where her baby was fighting for air. She wanted to say she was a good mother. She wanted to explain that Lily never missed appointments, that Claire watered down her own soup before she ever let Lily go without formula, that every late payment had a reason, and every reason had a tiny name. But no one had accused her of anything, and somehow that made the shame worse. When the ambulance pulled beneath the bright emergency entrance at Mercy Children's Hospital, Claire had to jog to keep up as they rushed Lily inside. The sliding doors opened to fluorescent light, polished floors, and the smell of coffee that had been sitting too long. A nurse directed them into a treatment room. Claire tried to follow, but another nurse stepped in front of her with a clipboard. "Mom, we need some information while the team works on her." "Full name and date of birth," Claire answered, her eyes fixed on the doorway where Lily had disappeared. "Lily Grace Bennett. March 9th. Insurance." Claire swallowed. "It may not be active." The nurse's expression did not change, but Claire felt the floor drop anyway. "We will still treat her. Do you have an emergency contact, or anyone we can call for you?" Claire thought of Mark Ellis, whose number was still buried in Lily's paperwork because she had once believed he might become better if given enough chances. She thought of calling him and hearing irritation before concern. She thought of him asking what this would cost. Claire tightened her hand around the diaper bag strap. "No," she said. "There is no one." The nurse softened for half a second, then wrote something down. From behind the treatment room door, a machine began to beep faster. Claire turned toward the sound, but the nurse placed a careful hand on her arm. "Please wait here." Claire stood under the harsh hallway lights in soaked pajama pants, holding $11 and a dead insurance card, while somewhere beyond the door her baby needed more than a mother's love could buy. Claire did not remember walking to the row of plastic chairs outside the emergency treatment area, but somehow she ended up sitting there with Lily's diaper bag on her lap and her wet hair sticking to her cheeks. The hallway was too bright for midnight. Everything shined in a way that felt almost cruel. The floors, the glass doors, the silver edges of the vending machines, the white letters above the nurse's station. People moved quickly around her, speaking in low professional voices, carrying charts, pushing carts, opening doors that closed before Claire could see enough to understand what was happening to her daughter. Every time one of those doors moved, she lifted her head. Every time it was not for her, something inside her sank a little lower. A nurse with kind eyes came out after what felt like an hour, but could not have been more than 10 minutes. "Miss Bennett." Claire stood so fast the diaper bag slid to the floor. "Is she breathing? Is Lily breathing?" The nurse nodded, and Claire gripped the back of the chair to keep from folding in half. "She is breathing with support. The doctor is examining her now. Her oxygen level was very low when she arrived, so we are running tests and giving medication to open her airways." Claire pressed a hand to her chest. "Can I see her?" "Not yet. The team needs room to work. I promise we will bring you back as soon as we can." The promise was meant to comfort her, but Claire heard the space around it, the things the nurse could not promise. She could not promise Lily would be fine. She could not promise the bills would wait. She could not promise that a mother with $11 and a dead phone would be treated the same as someone who arrived with a husband, good insurance, and a clean coat. "We also need to talk about admission," the nurse continued gently. "If Lily needs observation overnight or a pediatric intensive care bed, registration will need updated information." Claire knew that tone. It was the soft voice people used before handing her something impossible. "I understand," she said, though she did not. She understood diapers and fever charts. She understood measuring formula to the exact scoop and stretching gas until payday. She did not understand how to afford a hospital room that might cost more than she made in 2 months. The nurse guided her to a small registration desk near the end of the hallway where a woman in navy scrubs asked for Lily's full name again, Claire's date of birth, address, employer, insurance, emergency contact. The computer keys clicked with each answer, turning Claire's life into boxes that all seemed to accuse her. Employer, Lakeside Laundry and Cleaners. Position, evening attendant. Marital status, single. Insurance status, inactive. Emergency contact, none. When the woman asked about Lily's father, Claire's throat tightened. "He is not involved," she said. "Do you have his name for the record?" Claire stared at the fake plant beside the desk. One of its leaves had a tear down the middle, but someone had turned it toward the wall so customers would not notice. "Mark Ellis," she said finally, the name tasting like regret. "But please do not call him unless you have to." The woman typed without looking up. "We only contact listed parties when medically or administratively necessary." Administratively. It was such a clean word for something that could ruin her. Claire pictured Mark waking up angry, seeing a hospital number, blaming her before he even knew what happened. He had left when Lily was 3 months old, saying he was not built for crying babies, overdue bills, and a life that felt smaller every week. Claire had not begged him to stay. She had simply picked Lily up from the bassinet and learned how silence could be heavier than shouting. At the far end of the hallway, the elevator doors opened with a quiet chime. Claire barely noticed at first. Then the air changed, not because anyone announced him, not because he spoke loudly, but because several hospital staff members looked up at the same time. A tall man stepped out wearing a dark wool coat over a charcoal suit, rain shining on his shoulders. He carried no overnight bag, no flowers, no worried family expression. He moved like someone who belonged anywhere he entered, even at 12:39 in the morning in a hospital where everyone else looked tired or afraid. His hair was dark with a few silver threads near the temples. His face calm in a way that did not feel gentle, exactly, but controlled. He paused near the security desk, listening as an older administrator hurried toward him with a folder. "Mr. Whitman, I did not expect you back tonight," the administrator said quietly. Claire only caught part of the reply. "The board packet could wait. I wanted to review the pediatric wing numbers myself." Pediatric wing. Claire looked away, embarrassed by the sudden awareness of her damp clothes and bare ankles inside cheap sneakers she had shoved on without socks. The man in the dark coat did not look at her then. He was speaking with the administrator, his voice low, his attention focused, every word measured. But when the treatment room doors opened and a nurse called out, "Lily Bennett's mother?" Claire stood immediately. The man stopped speaking. Not turned fully. Not yet. But something in him went still. Claire rushed toward the nurse. "I am here. Is she okay?" "The doctor needs to speak with you," the nurse said. "We may need to move Lily upstairs." Claire nodded. But behind her, unnoticed, the man in the dark coat finally turned his head. His eyes followed her across the hallway, sharp and unreadable. Then, as if the name had reached into some locked room inside him, Noah Whitman repeated under his breath, "Lily Bennett." The doctor was a woman in her early 40s with tired eyes and a voice that had clearly learned how to stay calm around frightened parents. Her badge read Dr. Hannah Porter, Pediatric Emergency Medicine. Claire followed her into a consultation room with 2 chairs, a tissue box, and a framed print of sailboats on a lake, the kind of picture meant to make bad news look less frightening. It did not work. "Lily is stable for the moment," Dr. Porter said, and Claire clung to those words before anything else could take them away. "Her oxygen level has improved, but she is still working too hard to breathe on her own. We believe she has a severe respiratory infection that triggered airway inflammation. Given her history, I want to admit her to the pediatric intensive care unit for close monitoring overnight." Claire nodded too many times. "Whatever she needs. Please, whatever she needs." Dr. Porter's expression softened. "That is what we are going to do." But when the doctor stepped out to arrange the transfer, a registration coordinator appeared with a tablet, speaking gently, almost apologetically. "Miss Bennett, Lily's transfer upstairs is already being arranged, and nothing will delay her care. I just need to complete a few registration forms for the admission record." Claire stared at the screen without seeing the words. "Financial consent. Responsible party. Estimated charges." Her signature at the bottom of a number she could not understand because her eyes kept blurring. "I do not have active insurance right now," she said. I told the woman at the desk. "I am working on it. I can pay something. Not tonight, but I can make payments. I work. I always pay something." The coordinator lowered her voice. "We have assistance programs. We can have someone speak with you in the morning." In the morning. Everything impossible was always pushed into the morning, as if daylight could make poverty easier to explain. There was no version of this night where Claire refused to sign. Her hand shook so badly the signature looked like someone else's name. When the coordinator left, Claire walked back into the hallway and found the nearest vending machine, not because she was hungry, but because her body needed somewhere to stand. She leaned her forehead against the cool side panel and tried to breathe without making sound. A mother 2 chairs away was asleep under a sweatshirt. A teenage boy scrolled through his phone with his arm in a sling. Somewhere, a child cried, then quieted. Claire pressed the heel of her hand against her mouth. "Please do not punish her because I am poor," she whispered, not to anyone in particular. "Please. She is just a baby. She does not know what money is." 10 feet away, Noah Whitman had stopped beside a pillar near the nurse's station. He had not meant to listen. He told himself that as his administrator, Paul Renner, continued speaking about budget projections, donor commitments, and the delayed renovation on the 4th floor. But Noah was no longer hearing numbers. He was hearing the young mother's voice, cracked open by shame, asking the ceiling not to measure her child's life against her bank account. He looked at Claire Bennett carefully now. She was smaller than she had seemed from across the hall, wrapped in wet cotton, hair falling loose from a tired ponytail, one sneaker untied, one hand gripping a diaper bag like it was the last solid thing in the world. She could not have been much older than 27. Her face was pale under the fluorescent lights, but there was nothing weak in it. Fear, yes. Exhaustion, yes. But beneath both, something fierce remained standing. "Mr. Whitman?" Paul asked. "Are you all right?" Noah looked toward the double doors where Lily had disappeared. Who is handling the Bennett admission? Paul blinked. I can check. Do that. His voice was quiet, but Paul had worked for him long enough to know quiet did not mean casual. Within 2 minutes, a billing supervisor named Denise came down the hall carrying a tablet and trying to look composed. Mr. Whitman, the child is being admitted under emergency pediatric care. The mother has inactive insurance, but treatment is moving forward. I did not ask whether treatment was moving forward, Noah said. I asked who is handling the account. Denise glanced at Paul, then back at Noah. My office can oversee it. Noah removed a black card from his wallet. There was no flourish in the gesture, no desire to be seen. He held it low, between them, shielded from the hallway. Every medically necessary test. Every specialist Dr. Porter requests. Every medication. Every night upstairs. If the medical team says she needs it, approve it. If the mother needs transportation, meals, a room nearby, approve that too. Denise's eyes widened despite her professionalism. And how should we list your relation to the patient? Noah looked past her, toward Claire, who was now wiping her face with the sleeve of her sweatshirt before anyone could notice she had been crying. For a few seconds, he said nothing. The answer should have been simple. Donor. Administrator. Stranger. None of them felt true enough. Listed under the Whitman Family Emergency Fund, he said. Do not attach my name to anything she sees. Should we inform Miss Bennett that the account has been covered? Tell her only that Lily's care is cleared. No delays. No questions at the desk. And Denise. The supervisor straightened. Yes, sir. Noah's gaze sharpened. Do not make that mother beg twice. Denise nodded and hurried away. Paul stood beside him in silence for a moment before asking, carefully, do you know them? Noah watched as Dr. Porter came out, and Claire rushed toward her, hope and terror moving across her face at the same time. No, he said, though the name still echoed in a place he did not want opened. Then Dr. Porter said, Miss Bennett, Lily is ready to go upstairs now. And Claire covered her mouth as her knees almost gave way with relief. Noah stepped back into the shadow of the hallway before she could turn and see him, but just before the elevator doors opened for the pediatric intensive care team, he heard Claire whisper, thank you, whoever you are. Noah lowered his eyes, and for the first time that night, the powerful man who could buy entire hospital wings looked almost afraid of being recognized. Claire did not trust relief when it arrived too easily. She had learned that the hard way, in small humiliating lessons that came with late fees, declined cards, and people who smiled while explaining why there was nothing they could do. So when the elevator carried Lily upstairs to the pediatric intensive care unit, and the nurse beside her said, everything has been cleared for now, Miss Bennett. You do not need to worry about payment tonight. Claire did not feel saved. She felt the sudden cold of something she could not understand. Cleared, she repeated, her voice hoarse from crying. The nurse, whose name tag read Melissa, gave her a careful smile. Yes, Lily's admission and immediate care have been approved. Dr. Porter wants her monitored closely, and there will be no delay. But approved by who? Claire asked. The hospital? Melissa looked down at the chart just a little too quickly. The account has been handled through an emergency fund. Claire held Lily's diaper bag tighter against her chest. Through the glass wall of the pediatric intensive care room, she could see her daughter lying in a small hospital bed beneath a white blanket, a soft oxygen tube under her nose, monitors glowing beside her. Lily was breathing. That was the miracle. Claire knew that. Should have been enough. But fear had many shapes, and one of them looked like a bill paid by someone who would want something later. I did not apply for a fund, Claire said. I did not sign anything for that. You signed consent for treatment downstairs. Not for charity. The word came out sharper than she meant it to. Melissa's face softened, not offended, only sad in the way nurses sometimes looked when they had seen too many mothers trying to stand straight under impossible weight. Miss Bennett, accepting help tonight does not mean you failed her. Claire looked away because the kindness was too much. It reached places in her she had spent months protecting. People do not just pay for things like this, she whispered. Not for strangers. Melissa hesitated. Sometimes they do. Claire turned back to her. Who was it? The nurse did not answer. That was answer enough. Claire's pulse quickened. Please. I need to know. If this is a mistake, I need to fix it before it becomes worse. If someone paid, I need to know what they expect. I cannot have my baby caught in the middle of something I do not understand. No one is asking anything from you. Then why hide? Melissa glanced toward the nurse's station, where two doctors were speaking quietly near a computer. He asked that his name not be shared. Claire heard the word as clearly as if it had echoed. A man. A man she did not know had stepped into the worst night of her life and placed money between her daughter and disaster, then disappeared. She should have been grateful. She was grateful, so grateful it hurt, but gratitude did not erase the warning bells built by every broken promise Mark Ellis had ever made. I want to speak with him, Claire said. I understand, but right now Lily needs you calm. You can sit with her in a few minutes. Claire looked through the glass again. Lily's cheeks were still flushed, her tiny mouth parted, her lashes resting against skin too pale for comfort. A respiratory therapist adjusted something near the monitor, then nodded to Dr. Porter. The beeping stayed steady. Steady was beautiful. Steady was everything. Claire swallowed her questions and followed Melissa into the room. The world narrowed to the soft hiss of oxygen and the sight of Lily's small hand resting outside the blanket. Claire approached slowly, afraid that touching her would disturb whatever fragile peace the machines had helped create. Hi, baby, she whispered, brushing one finger over Lily's knuckles. Mommy is here. I am right here. Lily did not wake fully, but her fingers curled faintly around Claire's finger. Claire bent her head, and for the first time since the apartment, she let herself breathe. Minutes passed, or maybe longer. The clock on the wall said 1:18 a.m. Rain tapped gently against the dark window. Somewhere outside the room, footsteps moved down the hallway and stopped. Claire sensed the pause before she looked up. A man stood beyond the glass, half-turned as if he had only meant to pass by. The same man from downstairs in the dark coat. His face was clearer now under the hospital lights, composed but not untouched. He looked at Lily first, not at Claire, and something in his expression shifted so quickly Claire might have missed it if she had not been watching him with a mother's suspicion. Pain, recognition, fear. Then he lowered his gaze and stepped back. Claire rose from the chair. Wait, she said, though the glass swallowed most of the word. The man turned as if he had heard her anyway. For one strange second, neither of them moved. Then Lily made a tiny sound, barely more than a breath, and her hand slipped from Claire's finger. The man's eyes flicked to the baby. Claire opened the room door and stepped into the hall. Was it you? She asked. Her voice was quiet, but it carried everything she had no strength to hide. Did you pay for my daughter's care? The man looked at her, and up close Claire saw the silver in his dark hair, the rain still drying on the collar of his coat, the kind of restraint that belonged to someone used to being obeyed. Your daughter needed help, he said. That is not an answer. It is the only answer that matters tonight. Claire shook her head. No, not to me. I do not take money from strangers. His expression softened just enough to unsettle her. Then do not think of it as money. Think of it as time. Time for the doctors to help her. Time for you to sit beside her instead of standing at a desk defending why she deserves care. Claire's throat tightened. She hated that he understood. She hated that some part of her wanted to stop fighting and simply believe him. Who are you? She asked. Before he could respond, the door behind her opened wider. Lily had stirred in the bed, her eyes barely open, unfocused and glassy from exhaustion. She turned her head toward the hallway, toward the man's voice. Noah Whitman took one step closer without seeming to realize he had moved. Lily's tiny fingers lifted from the blanket, reaching weakly into the air. Claire looked back at her daughter, then at the stranger, whose face had gone completely still. Lily's hand opened and closed once, as if she knew exactly who had been standing outside the glass. Noah Whitman had faced boardrooms full of hostile investors, federal hearings, collapsed mergers, and rooms where a single wrong sentence could erase millions of dollars before lunch, but he had never felt as unsteady as he did when Lily Bennett reached for him from a hospital bed. It was not much of a movement. Her fingers lifted only an inch from the blanket, trembling with the weakness of a child who had fought too hard for something as simple as air. Still, the gesture crossed the hallway like a command. Claire saw it. No one knew she saw it because her face changed from suspicion to confusion, and then to something more frightening than either, a mother recognizing that her child had responded to a stranger before any explanation existed. Lily, Claire whispered, stepping back into the room. Sweetheart, it is okay. Noah remained in the doorway. He knew he should leave. He had already done what he came to do. The account was handled. The doctors had what they needed. The mother did not owe him a conversation, and the baby certainly did not owe him whatever impossible feeling had just opened behind his ribs. But Lily made a small sound, thin and sleepy, and her eyes stayed on him. They were blue-gray. Not simply blue, not simply gray, but that storm-glass color he had seen in only one branch of his family, in old photographs, in his own bathroom mirror some mornings, and in the face of his younger brother, Caleb, before grief turned his memory into something Noah avoided touching. "Do you know her?" Claire asked. Her voice was careful now, quieter than anger, sharper than fear. Noah looked from Lily to Claire. "No, then why is she looking at you like that?" "Babies look at people. Not like that." He could have answered with politeness. He could have stepped back and let hospital staff rebuild the wall between them. Instead, he found himself walking into the room slowly, stopping at the foot of the bed, as if approaching anything faster might break the fragile rhythm of the monitors. Lily's hand lowered to the blanket, but her eyes remained open. Claire stood on the opposite side of the bed, one hand on the rail, her body angled between him and her daughter, even though he had paid for the care that was keeping Lily safe. Noah respected that. In fact, it made something inside him soften. A mother who had almost nothing was still prepared to protect the one thing she had. "I am not here to frighten you," he said. "You appeared outside my baby's room after secretly paying for everything," Claire replied. "That is frightening, even if you meant it kindly." The honesty of it struck him harder than gratitude would have. "Fair enough. Then tell me your name." He paused, not because he was hiding it now, but because names changed rooms. His name made people adjust their posture, their tone, their expectations. He had wanted to avoid watching her do that. "Noah," he said. "Noah Whitman." Claire blinked once, and recognition moved slowly across her face. Not the instant recognition of a gossip magazine reader, but the uneasy recognition of someone who had seen his last name on hospital signs, donation plaques, insurance letters, and maybe the side of the very building she was standing in. "Whitman," she repeated. "As in Whitman Medical Group." "Yes." Her hand tightened on the bed rail. "This is your hospital?" "No. The hospital has its own board and administration. My company funds part of the pediatric wing and several emergency care programs." It was a precise answer, and he disliked himself for giving it. Claire looked down at Lily, then back at him. "So I was right. This is not normal charity. It is help from a man powerful enough to hide his name on my daughter's bill." Noah accepted the hit without flinching. "Yes." Claire let out a small, humorless breath. "At least you are honest about that." The corner of Noah's mouth moved, not quite a smile. Then Lily stirred again, her fingers curling against the blanket. Claire immediately bent over her, smoothing the baby's hair back from her damp forehead. The tenderness of the gesture held Noah still. There was nothing polished about Claire Bennett, nothing rehearsed. She was exhausted, underdressed, frightened, suspicious, and still every movement she made around that child was careful enough to look sacred. He looked away because the ache in his chest had become too personal. On the rolling tray beside the bed was a plastic hospital bag containing Lily's belongings. A tiny pink sock, a soft rabbit with one floppy ear, a folded intake bracelet. Claire noticed his gaze and shifted slightly, blocking the tray as well. "Why did her name matter to you downstairs?" she asked. Noah looked back at her. "What makes you think it did?" "Because I saw your face when the nurse said it. You knew the name Bennett." He was silent long enough that the monitor filled the room with its steady beeping. "I knew someone with that name once." "Who?" "That is not a question for tonight. You do not get to decide that after walking into our lives." Her voice did not rise, but it landed. Noah admired that more than he should have. Then his eyes moved to Lily again, to the shape of her brow, the color of her eyes, the small dimple in her left cheek that appeared even in sleep. Something familiar flickered there and vanished before he could name it. "Who is her father?" he asked. The change in Claire was immediate. Her face drained of color, and the softness she had shown Lily closed like a door. "Why?" "Because someone may need to be contacted. The hospital already asked me that. I am asking you. You do not have the right." "I know." The admission seemed to disarm her for half a second. Noah lowered his voice. "But I need to understand why a child named Lily Bennett is in this room, with those eyes, and no one standing beside her mother." Claire stared at him as if he had stepped too close to a truth she had buried without a marker. "Her father is not part of our lives," she said. His name is Mark Ellis. That is all you need to know. Noah's expression changed so slightly most people would have missed it. Claire did not. The name had not surprised him the way Caleb's name would later surprise him. It had disturbed him, because Mark Ellis was a name buried in one of the worst weeks of his family's life. You know him, she whispered. Noah did not answer fast enough, because the last time he had seen Mark Ellis's name, it had been on a cardboard box of Caleb's belongings returned after the accident. Before Claire could press him, a nurse stepped into the room with a phone in her hand and an apologetic look on her face. Miss Bennett, I am sorry. Registration attempted to verify the emergency contact on file. A Mr. Mark Ellis is on his way here. Claire closed her eyes. The exhaustion on her face became something heavier. Noah looked from the nurse to Claire, and in that moment the room felt smaller than before. Claire, he said quietly, using her first name for the first time, what did Mark Ellis do? She opened her eyes, and the answer was there before she spoke. He left, she said. And if he is coming now, it is not because he cares about Lily. Mark Ellis arrived at 1:47 a.m. wearing a wrinkled gray hoodie under a leather jacket, his hair flattened on one side like he had been sleeping hard and resented being woken. Claire saw him through the glass wall before he saw her. For one foolish second, some tired piece of her still waited for concern to cross his face. Lily was his daughter, even if he had walked away from the word father before it ever had a chance to settle on him. He should have looked frightened. He should have asked where she was, whether she was breathing, whether she had opened her eyes. Instead, he stopped at the nurse's station, pointed toward Claire, and said something that made the nurse glance over with discomfort. Claire already knew. Mark had always known how to make other people feel embarrassed for her. She stepped into the hall before he could come closer to Lily's room. Noah remained inside near the doorway, silent, watching through the glass with a stillness that made him seem carved from shadow and restraint. What happened? Mark asked, but his eyes were not on Claire's face. They moved past her to the monitors, the room, the staff, the polished equipment. The hospital called me. They said my name was still on some paperwork. Lily had a breathing emergency, Claire said. She is stable now, but she is in the pediatric intensive care unit. Mark exhaled like someone hearing about a parking ticket. So she is fine. Claire stared at him. She stopped breathing Mark. His expression flickered, not with tenderness, but with irritation at being forced to react. I did not say it was not serious. I am asking what this has to do with me. The hallway seemed to go quieter around them. Claire felt heat rise to her face, the old shame returning with terrible familiarity. You were listed as her emergency contact because when she was born, I still thought you might want to know if something happened to her. Do not put that on me, he said, lowering his voice without softening it. You made it very clear you could handle everything yourself. Claire almost laughed, not because anything was funny, but because the lie was so polished from repeated use that he probably believed it now. You left while she was crying in her crib. You packed your things and said you were not built for this. Mark looked around, aware now that a respiratory therapist near the counter could hear them. His jaw tightened. This is exactly what I am talking about. You always have to make me the villain. You made yourself absent. I only noticed. His eyes narrowed. So why did they call me? Is this about money? Because I am not signing anything. I am not getting dragged into some hospital bill because you could not keep your insurance together. Claire felt the words land where he intended them to land, in the rawest part of the night. She had been holding herself together, with fear and love and the steady beep of Lily's monitor. Mark's voice pulled at every seam. I did not call you, she said. I did not want you here. But you put my name down, did you not? He gave a small bitter smile. That is convenient. You do not want me until the bill comes. Claire's hands curled at her sides. Do not say that here. Why not? Everyone already knows, do they not? Single mom shows up in the middle of the night. No insurance, no money, and somehow someone else is supposed to clean it up. The nurse at the station looked away. Claire wished she could disappear and stand taller at the same time. Her eyes burned, but she refused to cry in front of him. Not again. Never again. Lily needed help, she said. That is all this is. Mark leaned closer, his voice dropping into something colder. And who paid for it, Claire? Because the nurse downstairs said the account was handled. You expect me to believe some hospital fairy just waved a wand. Claire did not answer quickly enough. Mark's gaze shifted past her, through the glass, and landed on Noah. Something sharp and ugly sparked in his expression. Oh, he said slowly. Now I get it. Claire stepped into his line of sight. Stop. Is that him? The guy in the expensive coat? That was fast, even for you. Do not. What did you tell him? Poor abandoned mother, sick baby, no one to help. His smile widened, but there was no humor in it. You always were good at looking helpless when it benefited you. The hallway air seemed to disappear. Claire heard Lily's monitor through the glass, steady and soft, a reminder that her daughter was sleeping only a few feet away while her mother was being reduced to something small and dirty by the man who had left them both. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Then the door behind her opened. Noah stepped into the hallway, calm enough to make the entire space feel different. He did not raise his voice. He did not move quickly. He simply came to stand beside Claire, close enough that Mark finally had to look up at him. That is enough, Noah said. Mark gave him a quick once-over, trying to decide whether to be intimidated or amused. And, you are who exactly? Noah's eyes did not change. Someone who heard every word. Mark scoffed. Good. Then you heard the truth. No, Noah said. I heard a man walk into a hospital where his child is recovering and ask about money before asking whether she is alive. Mark's face flushed. You do not know anything about me. I know your name. The words were quiet, but they struck Mark harder than they should have. His confidence faltered for the first time. Claire looked at Noah, confused by the certainty in his voice. Mark tried to recover with a laugh. Congratulations. The nurse probably told you. Noah took one step closer, still controlled, still unthreatening, but unmistakably powerful. No. I knew the name Mark Ellis before tonight. You were the man who returned my brother's belongings after his accident. Claire's breath caught. Mark's smile vanished. Claire turned toward Mark, but Mark was no longer looking at her. He was looking at Noah like a secret had just walked into the hallway. For a moment, the three of them stood under the bright hospital lights while Lily slept behind glass, and the past Noah had refused to explain suddenly seemed to enter the hallway with them. Mark Ellis did not step back, but something in his face changed when Noah said his name. The confidence that had carried him into the hallway cracked just enough for Claire to see fear beneath it, quick and startled, gone almost as soon as it appeared. Noah noticed it too. He had built an empire by noticing what people tried to hide in the half-second before they remembered to perform. You are making a mistake, Mark said, forcing a laugh that sounded too thin under the hospital lights. Whatever you think you know, it has nothing to do with me. Noah's expression remained calm. Then you should have no problem standing here while we clarify it. Clarify what? Claire asked, looking between them. Her voice was steady, but the hand resting against the wall had begun to tremble. Noah turned toward her, and the controlled hardness in his face softened immediately. Claire, you do not need to answer anything in front of him. Mark scoffed. Listen to this guy. He pays one hospital bill, and suddenly he is family. At that moment, the elevator opened behind them, and Paul Renner hurried out with Denise from billing and a hospital security officer walking a few steps behind. Paul's face showed the tense politeness of a man trying not to run in a place where running would cause alarm. Mr. Whitman, he said, then stopped when he saw Mark. Mark's eyes moved from Paul to Denise, then to the security officer, and the last of his arrogance began to drain. Claire heard the name clearly this time. Mr. Whitman. Not Noah from the hallway. Not a stranger with a black card. Mr. Whitman said with the careful respect people reserve for someone whose signature could open entire floors of a hospital. Denise approached Claire first, not Noah. Miss Bennett, I apologize for the confusion earlier. Lily's care has been fully approved through the Whitman Family Emergency Fund. There will be no request for payment from you tonight, no interruption in treatment, and no delay in any service Dr. Porter orders. Claire stared at her, the words too large to fit inside the night she had been living. Fully approved, she repeated. Everything. Denise nodded. Everything medically necessary for Lily's care. Mark let out a bitter sound. Of course. That is convenient. Noah looked at him. It is also none of your concern unless you are here to support your daughter. Do not lecture me about my daughter. You called her an account issue 5 minutes after arriving. Mark's face reddened. You have no right to speak to me like that. Paul cleared his throat softly. Mr. Ellis, this is Noah Whitman, chairman of Whitman Medical Group and primary benefactor of the pediatric wing you are standing in. The sentence changed the hallway. Even the nurse at the station paused with her hand above the keyboard. Mark's mouth opened, then closed. Claire turned slowly toward Noah. She had known he was important. She had felt it in the way people adjusted around him, in the quiet authority of his voice, in the way help appeared after he spoke. But hearing it spoken aloud made the floor beneath her feel less certain. This was not simply a man with money. This was the man whose family name was printed on brochures in waiting rooms, on plaques near elevators, on the side of mobile clinics that served neighborhoods like hers. This was the kind of man Claire had spent her life trying not to inconvenience. "You own all this?" she asked softly. Noah's eyes stayed on hers. "No, but I have enough influence here to make sure no one treats your daughter like a balance due." The words undid her more than charity would have. Claire looked away before he could see how close she was to breaking. Mark recovered just enough to sneer. "Very noble. Is this what you do, Whitman? Pick up desperate women in emergency rooms?" The security officer shifted, but Noah lifted one hand slightly, not in warning, simply enough to keep everyone still. "Be careful," Noah said. "Not because of me. Because your daughter is asleep behind that glass, and one day she may ask who stood outside her room tonight and what they said about her mother." Mark's jaw worked, but no answer came. Noah continued, voice low and even. "If you are here as Lily's father, you may sit quietly in the family waiting area and ask Dr. Porter for an update when she is available. If you are here to insult Claire, question her dignity, or create distress near a pediatric intensive care room, security will escort you out of the building." Mark looked at Claire, searching for the old version of her, the one who would shrink under embarrassment and smooth things over so no one else felt uncomfortable. But Claire did not move toward him. She stood beside Noah, still exhausted, still frightened, but no longer alone in the same way. "Claire," Mark said, changing tactics, softening his voice with practiced ease. "Come on. You know I did not mean it like that. I was just surprised. Nobody told me she was this sick." Claire looked at him for a long moment. Behind the glass, Lily slept with the oxygen tube under her nose, one little hand curled beside the stuffed rabbit. "You could have asked," Claire said. Mark blinked. "What?" "When you walked in. Before the money. Before the blame. Before all of this. You could have asked if she was alive." The words were not loud, but they seemed to settle over everyone in the hallway. Mark looked away first. Noah turned to the security officer. "Please show Mr. Ellis to the family waiting area. If he raises his voice again near this unit, he leaves." Mark's face hardened, but the security officer was already gesturing down the hall. "Sir, this way." For a moment, Claire thought Mark might argue. Instead, he gave Noah one last resentful look and walked away, his footsteps fading toward the elevators. Only then did Claire realize how tightly she had been holding her breath. Noah did not touch her. He did not crowd her with comfort. He simply stood near enough that the silence felt protected. "I am sorry," he said. "You should not have had to hear any of that tonight." Claire wiped under one eye with the back of her hand. "I have heard worse." Noah's face darkened, not with anger at her, but at the world that had taught her to say it so plainly. Before he could respond, Dr. Porter appeared at Lily's door. "Miss Bennett," she said gently, "Lily is stable enough for you to sit with her now." She opened her eyes again. Claire turned immediately, all thought of Mark falling away. But as she stepped toward the room, Noah glanced through the glass and saw Lily's head turned slightly on the pillow. Her left ear was visible now, the soft hospital light falling across the small curve of skin just behind it. Noah went still. There, half hidden beneath a wisp of fine baby hair, was a tiny crescent-shaped birthmark. His hand tightened once at his side. Claire noticed. "What is it?" she asked. Noah did not answer right away. He was staring at the mark as if the past had just reached through the glass and touched the child in the bed. "Noah," Claire said, fear returning to her voice. He finally looked at her, and all the power that had filled the hallway moments before was gone, replaced by something raw and almost impossible to hide. "That mark," he said quietly. "It runs in my family." Claire stared at Noah as if he had spoken in a language she understood too well, and not at all. The hallway around them blurred into white light, soft beeping, distant footsteps, and the hush of nurses trying not to listen. Behind the glass, Lily lay beneath her blanket, breathing steadily with help from the oxygen tube, unaware that the tiny mark behind her ear had just torn open a door in 3 different lives. "What do you mean it runs in your family?" Claire asked. Her voice was barely more than air. Noah looked at the crescent-shaped birthmark again, then forced himself to look at Claire instead. "My mother had that mark." So did my younger brother. The word brother changed his face. It did not break him, but it brought something close to the surface, something old and carefully locked away. Claire saw it, and despite everything, despite the fear, the money, the way his presence had overturned the night, she understood grief when it stood in front of her. She had lived beside it long enough to recognize its shape. That is impossible, she said. Lily is not connected to you. Noah did not answer right away. Dr. Porter, sensing the tension, stepped closer. Miss Bennett, Lily is stable. You can sit with her, but we should keep the room quiet. Claire nodded without looking away from Noah. I need 1 minute. The doctor hesitated, then gave them space. Noah lowered his voice. I need to ask you something, and I need you to know I am not accusing you of anything. Claire's fingers tightened around the strap of Lily's diaper bag. People usually say that right before they accuse you. He accepted that with a slight nod. Did you ever know a man named Caleb Whitman? Claire went completely still. The name did not simply surprise her. It moved through her like a sound from another life. One she had spent months refusing to hear because hearing it hurt too much. Noah saw the answer before she gave it. Her eyes filled, not with fear this time, but with memory. How do you know that name? She whispered. Noah's breath changed. He was my brother. Claire stepped back until her shoulder touched the glass wall. No, it came out small, almost childlike. No, that cannot be right. Caleb told me his last name was Reed. Noah closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them, there was a sadness in them that made him look less like a billionaire and more like a man who had failed someone he loved. He used our mother's maiden name when he wanted to get away from the Whitman name. He did it often. He hated what people expected from him because of who our family was. Claire covered her mouth with one hand. The hallway, the hospital, the storm outside, all of it seemed to tilt. Caleb Reed had been kind, funny, awkward in a way that made her trust him, with paint on his sleeves from volunteering at community art classes and a habit of buying 2 coffees because he said no one should drink bad coffee alone. He had never looked like money. He had looked like warmth. He had looked like the first safe thing Claire had found in years. He died before I could tell him, she said, the words breaking loose before she could stop them. Noah's face tightened. Tell him what? Claire looked through the glass at Lily. The baby's cheek rested against the pillow, the crescent mark hidden again beneath fine hair. That I was pregnant. For a moment, Noah did not move. The entire weight of the night seemed to gather inside that silence. Claire, he said carefully, I thought Mark Ellis was Lily's father. She shook her head slowly. Mark was on the paperwork because he was there when I was scared, and because after Caleb died, he was the only person who seemed to know what had happened to Caleb's things, his apartment, and the life he had kept separate from your family. Mark said he would help. He said Lily needed a name on emergency forms, someone reachable, someone practical. He told me the Whitmans would never believe a girl like me if I came forward with Caleb's child. I was grieving and pregnant and alone, and I made the worst decision of my life by believing him. Her voice trembled, but she did not look away. He is not her father. He never was. Noah turned toward Lily again, and this time the resemblance did not come as a shock. It assembled piece by piece, cruelly and beautifully. The eyes, the dimple, the stubborn little line of her brow even in sleep. Caleb had made that same face when he was determined not to cry as a boy. Noah put one hand against the glass, not touching Lily, only touching the barrier between what he had lost and what might still remain. Why did you not contact the Whitman family? He asked, but there was no anger in it now, only pain. Claire gave a fragile, bitter smile. I did not know there was a Whitman family. I knew a man who fixed leaky faucets for elderly neighbors, ate gas station sandwiches, and told me he was trying to build a life that belonged to him. I knew Caleb Reed. Noah looked down. That sounded exactly like his brother. Not the version in company photographs. Not the version their father had tried to shape. The real Caleb, the one Noah had been too busy to protect from loneliness until it was too late. Claire reached into the diaper bag with shaking hands and pulled out a folded document protected in a clear plastic sleeve. I carry this because hospitals always ask questions. She handed it to him. Noah took Lily's birth certificate carefully. The paper was creased at the edges. Mother, Claire Bennett. Father, blank. He stared at the empty line for a long time. It looked less like missing information and more like a wound. I left it blank because I could not prove anything, Claire said, and because writing Caleb's name felt like admitting he was gone. Noah's eyes lifted to hers. In them was the full force of a man realizing he had walked into a hospital as a stranger and found the last living piece of his brother. "Claire," he said, his voice rough for the first time, "Caleb did not leave you. He would have come back to you if he could have." Tears slipped down her face, quiet and exhausted. "I know." Behind the glass, Lily stirred, making a small sound. Both of them turned at once. Claire moved first, pushing open the door and going to her daughter's side. Noah stayed at the threshold, as if permission mattered more now than power ever had. Claire looked back at him through her tears. "You can come in," she said. Noah stepped into the room slowly. Lily's eyes opened just a little, unfocused but calm. Claire touched the soft hair near the birthmark. "Lily," she whispered, "this is your Uncle Noah." The word uncle struck him so deeply he had to grip the bed rail to steady himself. Lily's tiny hand opened on the blanket. Noah did not take it right away. He looked at Claire first, asking without words. She nodded. He placed one finger near Lily's palm, and her hand curled around it with surprising strength. Noah bowed his head, and the man who had paid for everything quietly finally understood the price of what he had found. But outside the room, near the corner of the hallway, Mark Ellis had not left the hospital. He stood partly hidden beside the vending machines, staring at Claire, Noah, and the baby through the glass. And when he saw the birth certificate in Noah's hand, his face changed, not with guilt, but with calculation, as if the secret he had kept after Caleb's accident had just become valuable again.